Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar brought to you by the Nazarian Center for Israel Studies at UCLA. I'm Dov Waxman, the director of the Nazarian Center and the Rosalind and Arthur Gilbert Foundation Chair of Israel Studies at UCLA. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I'd just like to thank our co-sponsors for this webinar, the UCLA Center for the Study of International Migration and the UCLA African Studies Center. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Sarah Willen. She's a medical and sociocultural anthropologist at the University of Connecticut, where she's an associate professor of anthropology and the director of the research program on global health and human rights at the university's Human Rights Institute. A former postdoctoral fellow in global health and social medicine at Harvard Medical School, she holds a PhD in anthropology and an MPH in global health, both from Emory University. She's also a two-time recipient of the Rudolf Virchow Prize from the Critical Anthropology of Global Health Caucus of the Society for Medical Anthropology. Professor Willen has edited or co-edited 3 books, including a book titled Transnational Migration to Israel in Global Comparative Context, that was published in 2007. She's also co-founder of the Pandemic Journaling Project, a combined journaling platform and research study about the lived impact of COVID-19, which I'll tell you a bit more about later. Today, she'll be talking about her recent book, Fighting for Dignity, Migrant Lives at Israel's Margins, which was published by the University of Pennsylvania Press in 2019. The book was awarded the 2019 Shapiro Prize for Best Book in Israel Studies from the Association for Israel Studies and the 2020 E.D. Turner First Book Prize in Ethnographic Writing from the Society for Humanistic Anthropology. So it's received rave reviews, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her presentation about this. As she gives her presentation, I want to encourage you all to send us your questions using the Q&A function in the bottom of your screen, and we'll have plenty of time for questions after her presentation. So without further ado, let me turn over to Professor Willen. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Waxman. Thank you to the Nazarian Center for the opportunity to speak and to the co-sponsors of this event. It's truly an honor and a delight. My only regret is that we're not able to meet in person. I actually spent some time in LA writing out part of my dissertation, and I'm having fond memories of Powell Library. And I imagine, given pandemic constraints, many of you are as well right now. But it's really an honor and a pleasure to share some of my work with you today. And before I do, I will seize this moment to say just a quick word about the Pandemic Journaling Project. Word of this really unusual but kind of interesting project that a colleague at Brown University and I have created as a way of giving us an opportunity to both create our own chronicle of this time that we're living through, unusual and troubling and uncertain as it is, while also putting our own perspectives in a research archive. So it's an opportunity to create your own downloadable weekly journal and also contribute to the historical record. So if you're interested, please do take a look at some of these links and see what it's about. But of course, we are not here today to talk about COVID-19. Rather, we are here to talk about this book, Fighting for Dignity, Migrant Lives at Israel's Margins, which I will mention is just as of this week available for pre-order in paperback. Finally, it's going to be an affordable book. So I did want to share that as well. Now, the focus of this book is a deportation campaign that was launched by the Israeli government in 2002. As some of you know, in the late 1990s, Israel became a migration destination for several 100,000 migrants from the global south, most of them arriving in search of work. And then in the late summer of 2002, for reasons I'll explain in a moment, these global migrants were quickly recast as a major social, economic, and political problem in need of a solution. And one take home of the book, for those who know a little bit of this story and a little bit about the present in Israel, is that in order to understand Israel's treatment of asylum seekers now, we really need to understand some of the changes that happened, the discursive changes and the ideological shifts that happened in the period that I'm going to talk about today. Now, this book is an ethnography. It's an empirically grounded study that's anchored in over 18 years of engagement, of research and analysis and critical reflection, including an intensive period of fieldwork primarily between 2000 and 2003, and then subsequent return visits for many years subsequent to that. Now, ethnography, for those who aren't familiar, is a classical anthropological research strategy that involves a lot of interviewing and a lot of group conversations, but also what anthropologists and our fellow travelers in other fields call participant observation, or a kind of deep hanging out with the people that we're studying for an extended period of time. And of course, when you hang out with people, you get to know them and you can develop meaningful connections and relationships. So for this book, I was involved as a participant observer in two separate but entwined communities. First are migrants. In this project, I've focused mostly on people who've come from the Philippines and West Africa, especially Ghana and Nigeria, to Israel, seeking work, and then stayed on with precarious legal status, sometimes for many years. And then my second group of interests, although I'll say a little bit less about them today, includes Israeli citizens. Most of them Ashkenazim, most of them in the Tel Aviv area, who decided for a range of reasons that they wanted to become involved as advocates or activists on migrants' behalf. And when I'm discussing this book with migration studies audiences, and I know we do have some migration scholars in the audience today, I tend to highlight its comparative value. And in this sense, the book builds on a collection that the Professor Waxman mentioned, 2007 compendium that sought to really put transnational migration to Israel in this larger global context and think about what's similar and what might be distinct. Are there unique features of what we see in Israel, or is it part of larger phenomena, larger dynamics, and ought it be seen in that regard? And of course, serious scholarship always lands on the yes and. So yes, it is very similar to much of what we see in other parts of the world, and yet there are some unique dimensions, and I'll try and delve into some of those today. Now, the story of labor migration to Israel really does, I think, have a lot to tell us about how migrants with precarious forms of status become illegalized and criminalized, and in sociopolitical terms, we could even say abjected, in the sense of abjection. So abjected by the states and the societies that they come to inhabit. And the book really focuses on the subjective consequences, or we could call them the dynamics of abjectivity for people who've been cast as unwanted others in an unwelcoming state. Now, at the same time, Fighting for Dignity is also a book about the challenge of studying migrants who are themselves illegalized and racialized as others from a position of relative security and privilege. And these challenges are both epistemological and also ethical. I conducted this research, and I write and I speak to you today as a Jewish American ethnographer who speaks pretty good Hebrew, and who, budget permitting, has been able to come and go from Israel and move about within Israeli sociopolitical space, more or less however I pleased. And my migrant interlocutors, of course, could not. And then finally, this is also a book about Israel, or Israel-Palestine itself. And I offer it as an attempt to challenge my listeners and hopefully readers, regardless of their own background or ideological commitments, to see this fraught region and its residents, old and new, through a new lens and in a new light. So that's what I'd like to try and do in our time together today. The other thing ethnographers do, in addition to hanging out with people, is we tell stories. So let me take you to a moment that was transformative and definitive and I think illuminating. And I'll start with a quick news clip that appeared in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz on July 1st, 2003. At least 5 people were killed on Monday, including a 5-year-old girl, when a canister of household cooking gas exploded, causing a 2-story house in Tel Aviv's blue-collar Hatikva neighborhood to collapse. Among those killed were a man and his pregnant wife, both foreign workers from Nigeria. Rescue workers were unsuccessful in saving their unborn child. Now, another resident of the building, a Nigerian man named Elijah, was spared. Instead of coming home that night, he had slept in a public park while his pregnant wife, Pauline, stayed in the flat that they shared with Pauline's sister, Rose, and brother-in-law, Reuben, the couple who had lost their lives. From his makeshift bed in the bushes, Elijah heard the explosion at 4:30 in the morning, not knowing that their 2-story building had been struck and his relatives killed, or for that matter, that his own wife had been spared. In the media flurry that followed the explosion, one detail caught local journalists' attention: Elijah's newly acquired habit of sleeping outdoors. And this is a quote from the same newspaper article. And I should add that I'm using pseudonyms, even though these names were published. Since the police increased the patrols, Elijah told the journalist, I barely ever sleep at home. All the Black men hide out at night and sleep in the bushes. In the mornings, he would come home to shower and go to his work as a house cleaner. So this was what we read in the newspaper. Now, a year before this building collapse, in late summer 2002, the Israeli authorities had launched a mass deportation campaign grounded in a catchy, if flawed, populist soundbite: 300,000 migrant workers living in the country, 300,000 unemployed Israelis. The government's newly created immigration administration, Minhat HaHagira, equipped with nearly 500 new officers, 4 new detention centers, and high monthly arrest quotas, had begun breaking down doors in the late night hours, pulling people from their beds and carting them off for swift deportation. A month earlier, Elijah had been the target of one such raid, and like many who narrowly escaped arrest, he and his wife moved immediately. For now, Pauline stayed with Rose and Reuben, and Elijah was sleeping outside. For a while, Reuben himself slept outside too, but as Rose's due date approached, he returned home to spend nights at his wife's side. So that summer morning, by the time Elijah normally would have been home getting ready for work, their building on Natan Street had collapsed in a pile of rubble. Crumbled concrete, tangles of steel and wire, pulverized mortar hanging in the air. Trapped in the rubble were Pauline, their flatmates, and 5 others who didn't make it, including an 80-year-old grandmother, a couple in their late 40s who had just moved in, a 5-year-old girl born in Israel to Filipino parents whose cries could be heard as rescue workers pulled her, still alive, momentarily from the rubble. 3 hours later, at 7:30 in the morning, my cell phone rang. Ayelet, a social worker from Mesila, a small municipal agency in South Tel Aviv where I regularly volunteered, was calling to ask if I could come help. An unusual agency of professional social workers supported by teams of volunteers, Mesila's unwritten motto revealed its delicate position. And this is essentially their motto. We won't interfere with government policies, but as long as migrants are here, they're entitled to a basic standard of respect and support, which it's our duty to provide. So by 8 a.m., I'd cycled across South Tel Aviv to the site of the explosion in Shchunat HaTikva, a lively, hard-scrabble neighborhood whose name, literally neighborhood of hope, belies visible signs of residents' daily struggles: weedy vacant lots, overflowing trash bins, mangy street cats, market smells of fish and slaughtered poultry sitting in the summertime heat. All looked peculiarly normal as I sped down narrow streets lined with aging 2-story buildings and through the neighborhood's tight intersections. Rounding the corner onto Natan Street, I was unprepared for the raw devastation that had already attracted a sea of onlookers. Hundreds of people, Israeli, Nigerian, Ghanaian, Filipino, crowded shoulder to shoulder, peering behind the police barriers and toward the gaping hole where, just hours earlier, a building had stood, full of people sleeping in their beds. The crowd stayed eerily quiet as uniformed soldiers, police officers, rescue crews with heavy equipment, and emergency personnel teamed about the live wreckage. Journalists scampered freely, snapping photos and thrusting microphones into people's faces without invitation, eager to package the rawness of individual trauma into media ephemera for consumption at a distance, soon to be forgotten. The director of Mesila guided me past the crowds and brought me behind the police barrier. At that point, with an active rescue operation underway, no clear mandate for action had been established. An African woman, her body contorted and eyes wild, sat in a huddle of women on a narrow stairway across from the rubble, weeping and praying. Her daughter and son-in-law are trapped inside, Ayelet told me as we walked by. I immediately recognized her as a woman I'll call Comfort, a woman who had welcomed me 3 years earlier into the apartment that she and her husband shared with several flatmates, including Yvonne, the Nigerian woman and single mother that I had come by to interview. Since then, we'd greeted each other warmly and regularly at the NGO-run open clinic for migrant workers, where she was a patient and I spent my afternoons as a volunteer and participant observer. When I saw Comfort on Natan Street that morning, my own limbs shaking and pulverized concrete invading my nostrils, I could barely recognize the hysterical woman on the steps. Unsure of how to make myself useful, I suggested I might pass those anxious hours with Comfort and the women who had flocked to her. As the sun rose in the sky, an emergency worker coaxed us all out of the heat and into a small shaded courtyard where an Israeli woman with a kerchief on her head took down laundry while tending to an infant. The pace of the rescue operation was excruciatingly slow. At one point, a soldier approached the courtyard with a plea for patience. "We're working carefully," he told Comfort in English. "It's the only way we can." He promised to return with an update. We didn't see him again. Eventually, a police officer approached me with a request. Could I clarify the names of the couple and of the woman who had been taken to the hospital? I took care to convey his question in the present tense. The heat was heavy beneath a preternaturally clear blue sky. Eventually, late in the morning, rescue workers emerged from the rubble, a black body bag in tow. It's Reuben, someone cried. A crowd surged toward the police barrier, and a scuffle ensued as several officers tried to hold people back. A Nigerian man fell to the ground, and an instant later, word reached Comfort. And then chaos. As she let out a piercing wail, crowds swarmed. Masila social workers trying to calm her down and offer her water, journalists shoving cameras in her face. It was horrible, I scribbled in a field note later that morning, just horrible. Only hours later did we learn the crowd had been mistaken. The body in the black bag was not Reuben's. It was Rose, his pregnant wife, and her near-term fetus could not be saved. Now, this is a horrible way to begin a book, right? But what I want to offer is that this building collapse on Natan Street was no commonplace event in South Tel Aviv. This was not normal. But much about that fateful morning followed disaster routine. Immediately after the explosion, curious onlookers poured into the streets, horrified but enraptured by an unfolding calamity. A high-tech, complex emergency operation, much like those Israel deploys in response to suicide bombings and exports overseas on humanitarian missions, kicked rapidly into gear. For just a moment, the tensions and antipathies that usually course through the streets and alleyways of this urban neighborhood gave way to a different logic altogether, a logic that put human life, bare, vulnerable, unmarked by social distinctions, above all else. But there was nothing redemptive about this erasure of social boundaries, especially since another darker tale lurked in plain sight. However authentic the Israeli authorities' momentary solicitude toward unauthorized migrant victims and their relatives, it contrasted starkly with the manhunt mentality that preceded it and that would resurface quickly in its wake. And as for Elijah, he owed his survival to a deeply unsettling paradox. What saved his life, above all, was precisely the aggressive deportation campaign that had hounded him out of his home and sowed fear and panic among the migrant men, women, and children, numbering around 100,000 as of 2002, who had recently taken up residence in Israel on an unauthorized basis. So this book, the book that I'm here to discuss with you, is a story of dignity and indignity and indignation. And I draw in this book on over 18 years of ethnographic engagement, including more than 30 months of non-consecutive ethnographic fieldwork in Tel Aviv, to explore the rhythm and the texture and the existential demands of everyday life for a relatively new population of excluded others in the charged sociopolitical space of contemporary Israel-Palestine, global migrants who've been illegalized by the Israeli state and Israeli society. And of course, the country's ethno-national migration regime and the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict form the backdrop to the story that it tells. So let me offer some maps to situate us in space. I won't say much about them, but if you recognize them, you can see that on the right, much of what happens in this book and the area in which migrants primarily took up residence in the time I was working was South Tel Aviv. Now, this expensive, heavily publicized mass deportation campaign coincided with my longest stint of fieldwork between 2002 and 2005. Those were the most intensive years of this particular deportation campaign. And in that period, more than 150,000 migrants were distanced from Israel, to employ the immigration police's sanitizing euphemism, in effect, they were regularly and systematically intimidated into leaving on what was not, but has been described or was hoped to be a voluntary basis. And of course, this was not the first period of arrest and deportation targeting global migrants in Israel, nor was it the last. But this particular campaign was unprecedented in scope and scale. And I argue that it marked a definitive moment in Israel's treatment of global migrants, who had started coming in the mid-1990s in response to the same array of push and pull factors that spur transnational migration the world over. So a close look at this particular deportation campaign offers a valuable point of comparison and contrast to other similar efforts to exclude migrants, to criminalize them, to arrest and deport them, including, of course, here in the United States. So in essence, the story of global migration to Israel, and to be clear, I'm speaking of migration outside of the law of return. So people who don't formally claim or cannot claim, a Jewish identification or background. So this story of global migration to Israel unfolds essentially in three phases, if we want to be a little bit crude. The first period involves the recruitment of authorized workers to replace Palestinians, and this happened in a relatively short period of time. So just to give some numbers to it, this is of course in the wake of the Second Intifada, when there were the heads of several major sectors were clamoring for workers to replace Palestinians who were not able to work in Israel because of closures imposed on the territories. So we can see this inversion, a radical drop in the dependence on Palestinian workers paired with a quick increase in the proportion of recruited authorized migrant workers in the Israeli labor market. And if you look at the numbers here, you can see that these numbers jumped very quickly in the 1990s. Now, another piece of the story, another wave of migration or phase of migration that was roughly coherent involves the migration of people who came without any kind of authorized arrangement, not part of a bilateral agreement with another state government, but who came on their own, often as tourists or as religious pilgrims coming through what I've described as a kind of tourist loophole in Israel's migration regime. And just to give you a sense of the folks I've worked with, so the Filipinos fit the first group. They didn't come to replace Palestinians, but they came on an authorized basis. And the West Africans that I worked with fit into the second group. Most of them came as part of Christian religious pilgrimage groups or with tourist visas with the intention of sticking around and looking for work. And then there's a third important group, some of whom had come in this period, but most of whom then came subsequent to this period of asylum seekers and refugees arriving overland, primarily through the southern border with Egypt. And I won't talk too much about that group today. Now, let's think about the migration regime, this migration campaign I've been talking about. It had a lot of elements. And, essentially because of when I was doing my work, I watched it emerge and unfold, and I watched its impact on the communities that I had gotten to know. So I mentioned that there were, many new police officers hired, 4 new detention centers. Some hotels were, in particular, a hotel in the city of Nazareth, the Renaissance, was converted into a detention center. This was a hotel that had been constructed in anticipation of a large influx of Christian pilgrims for the year 2000, which didn't materialize. And here was this large facility. And you can see in this photograph, which appeared in Haaretz, that the sign from the hotel was still hanging when it was converted into a detention center. So you can see in the back, it says, "Bruchim habaim lelev haRenaissance, malon עם הגישה למצוינות ותודת השירות." Welcome to the heart of the Renaissance, kind of a hotel with the commitment to excellence and service. So new detention facilities. The campaign also involved media ads in the newspaper, on the radio. And if you were an ethnographer trying really hard and paying close attention, you could sit next to your radio with a recorder and record these ads right at the top of the hour. The systematic arrest and deportation of community leaders, the cultivation of police informers. Another technique that I didn't believe at first, marking doors so that police officers would be able to locate migrants during late night raids. And when I first heard about this, I just didn't quite believe it. And then I started seeing the marks on doors. And then there was an article in Ha'ir, the local Tel Aviv paper. And I won't say much about the resonances and kind of the symbolics of what it would mean to mark doors as a kind of inversion of the story of Passover, where instead of marking doors as a sign of protection, it in fact becomes a marking that that's the harbinger of arrest, potentially quite violent arrest. So this was another technique of the deportation campaign. Another involved efforts to recruit families in particular to leave Israel on an ostensibly voluntary basis. So flyers like these were disseminated. I'm sure they're too small to read, but they're basically a kind of reasoned argument. In English, the one on the right I know, and the copy I have is ripped, but I have a copy in French as well. They essentially were pleas, trying to sort of negotiate with migrants and appeal to a sense of reason in a very, what I find to be a very strange and peculiar way. But these are some of the flyers that I collected in that period. And I mentioned that I won't say too much about asylum seekers who've arrived in the subsequent period, but I will say that this effort to encourage people to deport themselves, right, to self-deport, has recurred. So this is a flyer that was distributed at the beginning of 2018 when Netanyahu decided that a similar effort could be used to try and encourage people from Sudan and Eritrea who had come seeking asylum to leave the country. And the key difference was that in this case, they weren't being asked to return home because Israel couldn't deport to either of those countries for lack of diplomatic relations, but rather to agree to be effectively deported to a third country, to Rwanda or to Uganda. And my legal colleagues have raised many, many questions about the legality of this sort of arrangement, which is, to my understanding, unprecedented, in addition to being a lot of other things as well. So I just want to note that what was happening in the early 2000s has not disappeared, but in fact, we continue to see traces to the present moment. Now, before I go into the book, and I want to say a little bit more, but first I want to share with you a quotation from someone who's very dear to me, Nomi Chazan, who was a member of Knesset, deputy speaker of the Knesset, among many other illustrious roles that she has fulfilled over the years. But she was also my boss for 2 years, and she says some really, really smart things. And this is one of them. This is something that she wrote in a column in the Times of Israel in 2015. And I just, it felt to me like the kind of thing you put at the front of your book. So this is an epigraph to the book. Nomi wrote, she writes, "Contemporary Israel is one big bundle of contradictions. It's often as uplifting as it is off-putting, as compassionate as it is oppressive, as humane as it is cruel. Its people display amazing kindness and warmth, yet constantly exhibit reprehensible intolerance and xenophobia. They selflessly tender care to the needy while they close their doors to the dispossessed. And they sustain untenable policies at odds with the basic principles of human dignity, which they claim to hold so dear." Israel is a complicated place, and you know that because you're here listening. And so I want to sort of take that complexity and keep it in our pocket as we think with the different phenomena and the different developments that I'm talking about today. I also have another epigraph to the book from Hannah Arendt, who says something very wise in her work on natality. She says, "We are free to change the world." I can't move my little window here. Okay. "We are free to change the world and start something new in it." And this too is central to the book, as I'll say more about in a moment. This is not just a book about people being treated poorly by a state that doesn't want them. It's also a book about how people find ways to make their own lives, to make their way ahead, and to find meaning and to find purpose and to find ways to live with dignity and to flourish. And that's very much central to the story I want to tell. And I think this is something that as scholars, especially as anthropologists, we really need to do better. We need to look at the circumstances that put people in conditions of adversity. And we need to look carefully at the dynamics of exclusion and illegalization and criminalization. But we can't let that mode of analysis eclipse the reality of people's lives, or their courage, or their dignity, and their struggles to live with dignity. So let me just orient you to 4 themes. And I know there are a lot of words on this screen, but I promise to take you through it kind of slowly. So I want to talk just about a little bit about each of these 4 themes central to the book. First, the theme of indignity, or these lived realities of illegalization and sociopolitical abjection. Second, I want to talk about what I'll describe as Israel's local moral economy. And I'll say more about that in a moment. Third, I do want us to take a moment to really think with the pursuit of meaning and dignity and flourishing that's central to the lives of the people that I came to know, who generously allowed me to become part of their lives. And then finally, I want to say a quick word about Israeli advocates and activists who felt compelled for different reasons to mobilize on behalf of these groups. So let's start at the beginning. And this bit is, to a certain extent, for my migration scholar colleagues in the audience. In the book, I try to show how the illegalization that's faced by people like Elijah and Comfort and their families does involve this, a kind of sociopolitical abjection, which itself is a lived process with consequences that vary over time, over space, and that involve myriad indignities and violations. And I want to show in the book, I try to show how migrant illegality has 3 dimensions. It's a form of juridical status, it's a sociopolitical condition, and it's also a mode of being in the world. And I've described this approach elsewhere as a kind of critical phenomenology of illegality. And in the book, I refine some of my earlier work on this concept of abjectivity, drawing on the work of a British sociologist, Imogen Tyler, who regards this kind of abjection as a sort of design principle of British citizenship. Although, of course, it's by no means a uniquely British feature. And Tyler writes of Britain's local set of what she calls national abjects, or figurative scapegoats. The underclass, these are her terms, the underclass, the gypsy, the bogus asylum seeker, the illegal immigrant. Of course, Israel's catalog of national abjects is different. And I explore these local categories and their discursive interrelationship by drilling down into the dynamics of inclusion and exclusion, of belonging and otherness that shape how different groups of global migrants in Israel are represented and treated. And this brings us to our second theme. In the 3rd chapter of the book, I explore how Israel's ethno-national migration regime warmly embraces pretty much anyone with a bureaucratically legible tie to Jewishness, while leaving pretty much everyone else out in varying degrees of cold. And I argue that we can't understand Israel's treatment of this relatively new category of others, global migrants, a term I use to include both migrant workers and also asylum seekers. So we can't understand how Israel treats global migrants without first understanding how Israel treats those designated as the state's ostensible real others, Palestinians. And the chapter begins with a story that reminds us that there's nothing natural about these categories, or their moral valences or the lines between them, but rather they're the result of specific forms of discursive and ideological work. And I want to share a little bit of that story from the beginning of chapter 3. So this is from Emeka, a Nigerian community leader. He said at the beginning, at a meeting that I attended, he said, "We are not terrorists," boomed Emeka, a tall mustached Nigerian man in African garb who stood near the back of the improvised church. Once a manufacturing space, the cavernous hall was now spruced up with a bit of thin carpeting, a simple altar with microphones, and row upon row of white plastic lawn chairs serving as pews. The arrival of thousands of unauthorized migrants in South Tel Aviv had breathed new life into many of the area's industrial buildings turned churches, including this one, and those adjacent to it on busy Lavanda Street. But today's meeting at a sweaty summer afternoon, along with a few, was no worship service. Instead, Emeka and 70-odd other migrants, most of them West African men, along with a few Filipinos and others, had convened at the invitation, however improbable, of the Immigration Administration, whose year-long mass deportation campaign was about to enter a new phase. I sat near the back with my Nigerian friend Uche and two of his friends, one Nigerian, the other Filipino, and we saw many familiar faces. The event's organizers had promoted this gathering as a chance for dialogue, perhaps even negotiation. But the police had come with another goal in mind, to announce their new voluntary deporture operation. In exchange for a pledge to leave the country within a month, undocumented families could now register to leave Israel, and in exchange, gain a brief period of temporary immunity to the indignities of arrest, detention, and forcible deportation. And we saw the flyer that was distributed on that occasion, among others, which said, and I don't know whether you can read this, it's very small, you deserve to leave Israel with dignity. I found that especially striking. Now, Emeka, for one, was unmoved. "We are not Palestinians," he exclaimed, once the floor had opened for questions, his gaze arcing over the crowd toward the officers clustered at the front of the hall. He stood tall, microphone in hand, his voice brimming with anger and frustration. "We are not against you. We came here with a purpose, just like migrant workers do all over the world. Work with your conscience. If it were to be you, how would you feel? Do not treat us with stony hearts. We did not fall from hell. We came from somewhere. We are not criminals, even if we are illegal. We are human, irrespective of the fact that we are Black." Emeka's pleas bore little chance of derailing the deportation campaign or mitigating the humiliation and violence that trailed in its wake. Now, a top-ranking police official known by his first name in some of the city's migrant communities, and I'll call him Rafi, tendered a hasty response. "We think you are good people," he insisted, his English staccato and rough. "We don't think you are criminals. If we thought you were criminals, we wouldn't face you like this." Emeka and others gathered would undoubtedly have disputed these claims, but both sides agreed on one point. Unauthorized migrants in Israel were others, but not that kind of others. For most of the anxious crowd, that was cold comfort. Now, as this unusual exchange between Emeka and Officer Rafi makes clear, this deportation campaign may have much in common with others around the world, but it also reminds us that campaigns to illegalize and criminalize migrants are deeply localized, and their logic and expression deeply particular. The tone and tenor and dynamics of this deportation campaign offer a lot of insight into what I've described as Israel's local moral economy. And this is a term that bridges scholarship on moral economies with anthropological work, especially by the anthropologist Arthur Kleinman, on local moral worlds. And I won't say too much about that unless there's interest, but I'm trying to pull together work from sociology and political science and from anthropology that's really attentive to the dynamics of lived experience. So we could define it like this. A local moral economy can be understood as a shared matrix of historically and culturally particular memories and emotions, values and expectations that sets up the parameters of everyday discourse and collective moral reflection. So it's kind of like a sociocultural X-ray or a penetrating view of how society works, how history and affect and morality become crystallized in ways that recur and that repeat in different domains. Israel's local moral economy has various elements, and I would argue that central among them is a biopolitical logic that divides more or less anyone in Israeli space, Israeli sociopolitical space, into one of three categories. Either you're a ratified citizen, a Jewish Israeli, you belong to this category of purportedly real others, Palestinians, and here I would include Palestinian citizens of Israel as well as Palestinians living under occupation. And then this newish, sort of not entirely clear, changing category of other others into which we can put these different groups of global migrants. This isn't the only element of Israel's local moral economy. I would point to several others as well, and I write about them in the book. We can think about the role of historical memory, including but not only around the Shoah, attention to security, a central preoccupation, demography and anxiety about demography. We can think about the role of pronatalism and a kind of ideology of fruitful multiplication that might have religious roots, but certainly doesn't remain in the religious domain. So these are some of the elements of what I argue are Israel's local moral economy. Let's turn to a third theme, The image of Elijah sleeping in a Tel Aviv park to avoid late night arrest raises another set of questions about what it means to pursue a meaningful, dignified, flourishing life under conditions of adversity, exclusion, and even abjection. And in the book, I approach this question in several steps, asking, first, what do we even mean by dignity? And what do we mean by flourishing? Those seem like important questions to think with before you can come to good answers. And so here's the gist of my argument. I suggest that dignity only becomes visible in motion when it's harmed or denied, when it's violated or stripped away, or conversely, when we're thinking about dignity pursued or safeguarded, something recuperated or reclaimed. And if we think about dignity this way, I think it allows us to kind of get our minds around a tangle of desires that are pretty common, that most people share. A desire to be treated on the basis of our words and our deeds, a desire to be meaningfully connected to other people, to belong, a desire to feel grounded and secure, and also a desire to shape the world that we inhabit in some meaningful way. So this is just a very quick glimpse, but of course I developed these ideas ethnographically at some length in the book, drawing, again, generously on insights from the many people who let me spend time with them and allowed me into their lives. And I'll turn now to a fourth and final theme that also involves an aspect of dignity, but another dimension, a burning sense of indignation among a small group of citizens who witnessed what their government was doing in their name and felt compelled to resist. And I'm speaking in the past tense because of when I conducted most of my work, but I will point out that many of these groups continue to be active today. There are new groups, there are other groups, there are groups that have emerged among the communities of asylum seekers and refugees that have taken on new roles. And in fact, I had an opportunity to talk about the book with some of these leaders just a couple months ago. So please don't be misled by my use of the past tense. But among those that I got to know and interview and spend time with and volunteer with, these were people who felt compelled to raise their voices and to find or create spaces of encounter and solidarity in the service of what the Israeli philosopher Avishai Margalit describes as a decent society, right? A society that doesn't humiliate. And I came to know these advocates and activists primarily through long-term involvement and participant observation with three organizations. First is the municipal organization I mentioned earlier, Mesila, which is run by social workers and part of the municipality of Tel Aviv. The other two are human rights groups, including Physicians for Human Rights Israel, which runs a clinic for migrants and asylum seekers. And another organization that used to be called the Hotline for Migrant Workers, now is called the Hotline for Refugees and Migrants, that was established to support individuals in detention or in deportation proceedings and their families. And these groups and the people involved with them differ in many ways that are really interesting and that I write about to some extent in the book. But they also have something important in common, and that's that they reject state arguments that it's migrants who are the problem, right? They reject government invocations of kind of vague demographic concerns to justify policies and policing strategies that harm migrants and their families and their communities. And earlier I mentioned some of these core elements of Israel's local moral economy: powerful historical memories, including memories of the Shoah, profound anxiety about security, a celebratory disposition toward reproduction and children. And these are all, anyone who's spent time in Israel knows these are inescapable dimensions of everyday life and everyday talk and everyday reality in Israel, and arguably in the broader region too. And whoever you are and whatever your social location, these core elements affect one's life. You kind of can't avoid them. But what I find useful in this notion of a local moral economy is that it allows us to see how different people position themselves in different ways in relation to these core elements. And from the perspective of the advocates and the activists that I worked with, kind of we could distill much of what they feel and articulate as a sense that, rather than, for instance, taking Israel's collective memory of the Shoah and boiling it down to never again to us, it's for them, never again to anyone, right? So they take the particularity of Jewish experience, the particularity of Israeli experience, and distill it into something that has a more universal dimension and face. And that's something that people tended to agree on among the advocates and activists that I got to know. So as you've probably gathered, this is not an easy book to read, and it certainly wasn't an easy book to write. If it succeeds, I hope it's on this count. I hope it's by shedding light on some of the ways that we can learn and share through immediate face-to-face encounter with different people who live differently in relation to history and politics and exclusion and violence. The psychoanalytic anthropologist Hélène Corin offers an insight that I find really valuable. She reminds us that ethnography always entails what she calls inquiétude, a sense of inquietude, unsettledness, uncertainty, even worry. Ethnographers are always asking ourselves, have we gotten it right? Have we truly understood our interlocutors or their stakes and strivings? And sometimes we can be reasonably confident that we have. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes our representations are not fair or just, but there is a certain power in the immediacy of ethnographic encounters that seizes us, and hopefully our readers and our listeners, in a place where abstract theorizing cannot. And I expect for many who encounter this book, it will prove unsettling and uncomfortable. And in fact, I hope it will. But at the same time, I hope that it will provoke some equally unsettling questions about comparisons and their value as well as their limits. So there's a little bit more I could share if time permits. I have no idea what time it is.
We are, I think, ready to take some questions from the audience.
That sounds great.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Sarah. That was a really marvelous presentation and also a really excellent example of what it is to be a critical anthropologist, to kind of bring the voices of the subjects you study to hear to us. And I know personally I was very moved by hearing about their experiences. So thank you for sharing with us. So we have a number of questions from the audience. I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative and start off with one of my own. And this is kind of the period that you focus on from 2000 to 2003. This is a period where initially there was a Labour-led government in office under Ehud Barak, and then a Likud-led government. And so there seems to be a kind of consistency between both Likud and Labour, different political parties. I'm wondering about what you see as the kind of driving force of this approach. I mean, you mentioned Israel's ethno-national migration regime. So do you see this approach to migrants and the attempt to encourage, expel migrants as driven largely by this kind of ethno-nationalism, this demography, which is this ever-present concern, even though the numbers are relatively small, 100,000 at this time? Or was there a kind of populist, economic populism? I know later, the campaign, the argument that they was taking jobs away, particularly from Mizrahim in South Tel Aviv, or crime. I mean, where do you see as the driving force behind this approach to migration?
Yeah, it's a great question for a political scientist, and I'm an anthropologist, so I will be modest in hazarding an explanation here. But I think so. And first, in fact, Sharon was prime minister at the beginning of this work. So, I remember Sharon going up on the Temple Mount in September of 2000. I had just begun my first period of field work, so it was sort of Sharon into a series of Likud prime ministers. But I think what we're seeing is not, and I know this will come as a surprise to those of us who look at political leadership around the world and see clarity of purpose and synchronousness and alignment with ideology always ever, right? I think we're seeing leaders trying to manage a changing environment, and I think we see a number of different forces that come into play together. I think, one of the most interesting things I think I can offer by way of response comes from a really wonderful sociologist in Israel, Zev Rosenheck, who wrote very early, in the mid 2000s, that something that was distinct about the Israeli case when we compare Israel's treatment of migrants and we compare attitudes toward migrants and migrant workers in Israel to attitudes in other countries is that we don't see the kind of grassroots xenophobia that you see elsewhere. It wasn't coming from below. It really wasn't until 2013 when we saw certain tensions emerging, especially in South Tel Aviv, local residents, in some cases being incited by various forces to organize in ways to oppose the continued residence of asylum seekers in their neighborhood. It was really only then that we began to see kind of organized xenophobia. What we see in this period of 2002 to 2005 was a decision made, I think, again, I'm not a political scientist, and but from my standpoint, I think what we saw was that the solution to the labor problem had suddenly created a demographic phenomenon that was starting to feel like it was getting out of hand. And so from, the standpoint of political leadership, the response was to try and rein it in that language and that idiom. And in order to do that, certain kinds of discursive moves had to take place, like having ads on the radio that said these people, they're a problem, we need to get rid of them, they are a threat. So that's what I can offer. I think trying to solve a problem, lots of different things happening, and this very interesting phenomenon of needing to kind of convince the public that the presence of migrant workers in Israel was in fact a threat, whereas in other countries we see something very different happening.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn now to some of the questions that we have from the audience. One question just kind of picks up from something I was mentioning, asking that you mentioned that the organization that you focus on, the Mitzilla organization and other advocates for migrants were largely Ashkenazi. So, is that, does that speak to an Ashkenazi Mizrahi divide on the subject, particularly the concern about Mizrahi workers, lower wage workers being displaced by economic migrants?
Yeah, I think what I was seeing in that period was less a matter of sort of ethnic divisions between Mizrahim and Ashkenazim, and more a class division. That the people who were, feeling inclined to volunteer or work in these organizations tended to be people who lived in other parts of the city, who tended to have higher levels of education or be on a track to study in university, and who were coming from a different kind of political orientation. So I don't think it was about ethnic identity. I think it was more about people's kind of political bearings and socioeconomic status. And again, the landscape is quite different now, I think, because of a lot of what's changed in South Tel Aviv.
So I'm wondering as well, looking at the specific groups that you looked at, migrants from West Africa and from the Philippines, to what extent racism, I should say, plays a role in this. From my kind of just cursory experience of this, Filipino migrants in Israel tend to be kind of there's less concern about, there seem to be more kind of sympathetic news stories, etc., as opposed to migrants from sub-Saharan Africa. So just to what extent did you see racism manifest particularly in the differences between how these two groups, if there were any differences between how these two groups were treated?
Oh, absolutely. I think first, and there are many factors to this. It's not just about race. It's about not being phenotypically Jewish appearing. So let's start with that. And then there are these differences. So, all of the people I worked with moved through Israeli space knowing that they didn't look Israeli and wouldn't look Israeli, and people wouldn't mistake them for being average Israeli citizens. And I should mention that, now there are some children of these folks who came in the early 90s who have graduated from school, who are serving in the army. I just got a picture from a Nigerian friend of mine last week of her son who just entered the army wearing his mask. His mother's from Nigeria, his father's from Ghana. He was born in Israel and he's now an Israeli soldier. So yes, and so that means that certain things are changing, and we could have another conversation about some of those changes and how they've come to be, and why there are even some children who've stayed in Israel and had the the opportunity to become soldiers, which is something that they then have chosen. But I would say that another important piece involves labor sector, right? So Filipinos come to care for elderly people, and the kinds of relations that develop between Israelis and Filipinos are much more intimate than the sorts of relations that were that would tend to develop between people coming from West African countries, or people who are coming on an unauthorized basis more generally. So there's the intimacy piece. There's also the fact that there are many documented Filipino workers in Israel. So when one sees a Filipino, person from the Philippines on the street in Israel, one doesn't necessarily assume that they are undocumented. So there's a kind of buffering effect, which doesn't exist, or it didn't in this time exist for people from Nigeria or Ghana. But beyond that, absolutely, racism is a huge factor. And we heard a little bit from in that story from Emeka about feeling that being Black was part of how the police were seeing him and judging him and responding to him. And of course, that's embedded in a much more complex moment. But absolutely, the people I worked with had a lot to say about feeling racialized and treated in racist and discriminatory ways. But it's very difficult, and this is where we need a kind of intersectional lens. It's very difficult to pull out the race piece from these other pieces of, status, educational level, opportunity to be situated in society, immigration statuses, et cetera.
So we have a question. I'm going to read this question rather than try to summarize it. To what degree can ethno-national morality oppose or support the government stance? If it becomes less particular, as you say, and keeping never again as including everyone, when does that tip toward opposing the power structure, as in helping others at the expense of the in-group? And is that something that is determined by the power structure or something that is determined by global Jewish morality?
I feel like I want to sit with this person and talk for, because there's a lot in this question. By way of answer, I will point to something quite interesting that we see when discussions emerge and fights emerge between people who tend toward the humanitarian or human rights orientation among the advocates and activists that I mentioned, and those who take a more conservative, anti-immigrant stance. And it kind of boils down to two, biblical expressions. It's either, Aniyei Chakodbim, right? The poor of my city come first. Those are the people I have an obligation to. Those are the people that I'm entwined with. They are part of my destiny. Or, and of course, I'm now blanking on the other. Or it's right? Or it's and you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And so in each case, we see that Jewish morality itself, Jewish text, lends support to very different and indeed contradictory political orientations and political stances. And people, in Israel, and this is part of the local particularity, part of what's so interesting, that you can kind of fight in biblical terms. It's also interesting on occasion when migrant workers and migrant groups have tried to do the same thing and been told, that's not going to work, right? So trying to claim, we are committed to the Jews, the Jewish people. We see ourselves as being part of this longer biblical legacy. And, and I write at one point about activists saying, don't try and argue that way, because it's certainly not going to persuade the secular folks, and it's not going to persuade religious people either. So we see that, biblical and Talmudic terms and concepts and principles become part of how disputes about politics and power are articulated in Israel. And I would say, in relation to this particular question, we have to sort of look at particular actors in a particular moment, hashing out a particular issue. I don't think there's one. This is a question we could sit with for a while, but I think I'll offer that by way of response.
Great, thank you. So a question came in about, you mentioned the children now of some of these migrants who have grown up in Israel and have been able to stay, and in the one case you mentioned joining the army. Is there a path to citizenship? Somebody was asking for, like the soldier that you mentioned, is now performing military service, therefore a way of becoming Israeli, a way of de-otherizing yourself, if you like?
This is a great question. And I would say the book is overall a story of people living in very difficult circumstances and being treated in ways that involved a lot of exclusion and criminalization and sometimes aggression and violence. It's a tough story. And the deportation campaign, as I mentioned, 150,000 people kicked out of the country is not a big number by the US standards. By Israeli standards, it's pretty big. And so the communities in which I worked don't exist now. And by the mid 2000s, they did not exist in the way that they had existed. I didn't expect to be doing a kind of 11th hour ethnography, but in a sense, that is in fact what I ended up doing. But there were some people who remained. Often it would be, moms with children who would stay because a father would be deported and a woman would remain with her children because they would be harder to deport. And at two moments, one around 2005, 2006, and a few years later in 2010, through, again, very particular localized struggles involving NGO actors and involving kind of, the alignment of political leadership at the national level, arrangements were made that allowed us, in each case, a small group of children born in Israel to migrant parents to obtain a form of residency status. And with that status, the parents also were able to remain. So the children obtained a more permanent form of status, the parents a more, renewable form of status, under the arrangement that if the children served in the army, then things would solidify yet further. And that would provide a pathway for families to remain in the country. Of course, it puts a lot of pressure on children to then serve in the army. Although often children have wanted, and these families have wanted to do precisely that. So this is not a change in national policy. It does not reflect a move toward birthright citizenship the way we have in the United States. Israel does not have a birthright citizenship provision. So all of the children born to women I got to know and families I got to know lived in Israel without any form of formal status in Israel, with the exception of this small group of children. And there were a very particular set of criteria that needed to be met. The children had to be, I think they had to be 6, they had to be studying in Israeli schools, they had to speak Hebrew. So evidence needed to be offered that these were children who really had a level of commitment and grounding in Israel, in addition to meeting certain bureaucratic criteria. But these are small numbers, and they don't represent a major policy change. But they do represent a different set of voices and perspectives and experiences within Israel. They are Israeli, right? And the argument, especially in the second moment in 2010, the struggle was fascinating. I write about this a little bit in the conclusion to the book. We saw a group of young people, many of whom had been involved with advocacy and activist organizations, who basically said, you know what, we're not going to play the game of staying on the left that these NGOs have been doing. We're going to move to the center, and we're going to make an argument in Zionist terms that these are Israeli children. And that these are children who, because they speak Hebrew, because they're in Israeli schools, because they tell jokes in Hebrew, because they identify and they want to celebrate holidays and they're ready to serve in the army, they're, for all intents and purposes, Israeli. So just give them the status that they need. And they managed to recruit, political leaders and national leaders from the center and even from the right. And that was part of their success. So they played a very different game, and it involved staking claims in quite clearly, Israeli and even Zionist terms. But it's a very interesting story, but also an exception.
Fascinating. So in a way, they're kind of contesting the definition of Israeliness or trying to expand the meaning of Israeliness to encompass a broader kind of civic understanding.
Yeah, whether they are or not, whatever their intentions may be, the fact of their existence, it does offer that kind of contestation.
So we just have time for a couple more questions. So I'm going to put them both to you. One is a question I'm sure other people in the audience had as well. Despite the harsh procedures used to enforce Israeli visa and work laws, does not the Israeli government have the ability to control its immigration policies, like all countries, when we're talking about tourists overstaying their visas, rather than asylum seekers who receive protection under international law? So, so essentially Israel has the right to do this, as do other governments. So I suppose, can it be done? Can the be done in a way that does respect people's dignity, that doesn't necessarily undermine their dignity. And then this is a more practical question that somebody asked, but I think it's worth mentioning, whether you can recommend an organization, this is from somebody who's in Israel, if there's a particular organization that you'd suggest they can donate to or volunteer with that helps migrant causes, which I think is a practical way to do this.
Yeah, that's a terrific, right. So in terms of the first question, this is a great question. And, I teach in the United States and I teach about the United States as well. And often when we start thinking along these lines, we get stuck thinking about laws as something rigid, as though they have always existed and must exist the way they do, and as though they are in sync with other aspects of political life and the economy. And often they are not. Often they are disjointed. We see this in particular in the United States, right? In the United States, our entire food production system and agricultural system is set up such that we're able to buy food at relatively low prices. And that's only possible because the entire industry or multiple industries depend on the work of vulnerable, exploitable, undocumented workers. So when we think about people as lacking legal status within a particular country, I would argue that the first question we have to ask is, well, why are they there in the first place? It's probably because things were hard in their country and they were seeking economic opportunity abroad, right? But that's not the only reason. It's also because there's a labor opportunity. It's also because, in many cases, they're needed. Certainly in the United States, that's the case. In Israel, that was very much the case in this period as well. And here's where we have to go back to that question of, what were the motivations of the state? Well, we saw kind of benign neglect for a period of time because interests were being served, economic interests and political interests. And then at a certain point, one interest rises up and gains more attention, and then it becomes a problem that requires a different kind of story to be told and a different kind of solution or resolution. So absolutely, states are sovereign and have control over their borders. And, I'm not a no borders person. Some people are, and that's a legitimate argument that I think many of us should be having more. But before we go in that direction, I would argue that we really need to think about who's served by the existence of the laws and the borders and the migration statuses, and take a close look at that larger picture, and recognize that if people are living in Israel on an undocumented basis, in many cases, there are actors benefiting, and we need to think about how they're benefiting and at whose expense. So that's a partial response to that very important question. In terms of, and I do want to very quickly mention, some folks have asked about how I've, hardly mentioned Eritreans or Sudanese, and that's true. My work primarily focused on the period before, 2007 onward, 2007 to 2013 or so, when we saw large numbers of Sudanese and Eritreans coming into Israel. And so there are things I can say about that, but that's not my expertise. But in terms of this final question of, are there organizations that are worth paying attention to, volunteering with, or lending support? There are many. I would, of course, name two that I have great faith in and that I've come to know very well over the years. One is the Hotline for Migrants and Refugees. Another is Physicians for Human Rights Israel, which runs a clinic, which continues to be one of the only places where people with precarious status of this sort can get care. And as you can imagine, communities of global migrants in Israel now are particularly suffering as we all struggle with this pandemic. So those are two in particular that I would name, but there are many others, some of them led by asylum seekers and refugees, the African Refugee Development Council. There's an organization called ASAF. There are lots of them. And if you want more specifics, I'm happy to answer emails.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Professor Willen. This was really fantastic, fascinating for all of us, I'm sure, and I'm really grateful to you for sharing your experience and your work with us. And I want to encourage everybody to get the new paperback edition of the book, which is just out this week.
Yep, only on Amazon so far for pre-order, but
right, and review it as well, and positive reviews. Thank you again. Thank you everybody for joining us today. This will also be available on our website as well as on YouTube for you to watch again. So thank you
so much.
Willen. and Willen, sorry, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.